Can you even tell I'm wearing glitter? This is the skin of a Bella. So I recently read all 6 Twilight books. 6? There's not 6 books, there's 8 books. I read all 8 Twilight books, and I desperately need to talk about it. So here we go. Some context. I saw the movies first, and recently, I've only seen all the movies last year in 2025, and I read the entire series this spring. I try to read one fantasy series a year, and I decided I was going to try for Twilight this year. In the past, I've read things like A Song of Ice and Fire, The Witcher, the Arthurian Saga, more stuff like that, more things that are obviously more male-coded. And although I disagree with that with Arthurian Saga, but that's not what this is about. And so I got Twilight, and I was like, if I like the first one, I'll read 1 through 4. And then I really liked the first one. I decided I was going to read 1 through 4 and The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner. And then I finished all those, and I decided to read Midnight Sun, Life and Death, and even the illustrated guide. So I have a lot of thoughts on the books, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of things in the movies that I really like. The movies are super faithful to the books, and they like everything they changed. I actually really liked. In the first movie, showing James's coven before the baseball game makes a lot of sense because there is not a ton of conflict in Twilight. The will they won't they lasts until halfway through the book. Without that tension, I feel like the movie would have really suffered. You kind of need a big bad sooner, especially for general audiences want more than just a romance story. I also really like the fake out in Breaking Dawn, having everything happen in Alice's vision and then cutting back to none of that happened and they kind of just walk away. Mostly because I think the climax is good in Breaking Dawn, the book, but I don't know how you really show that without an inner monologue from Bella and showing the shield. Like, her mental game against the Volturi really works better on a page than it would have in the book. And so I kind of like how they rectified that in the movies. I think that was fun. And it's like a classic movie moment. It was really fun. And in general, I love the movies. And I don't just love them in like a trash, oh my God, what's happening way. I do like them in that way, but I also just like them in general. I think they're good movies. Now, I know I am late to this party. I saw the movies at 28 and I finally read the books at 29. I grew up with the Twilight hype and hate, and I kind of didn't do much but make fun of it because I was an idiot little boy back then, and now I'm not. I would have really enjoyed these as a kid, although I didn't do much fiction reading as a kid anyway. But now I want to get into the books. I'm not going to really talk about the Volturi being the Catholic Church or imprinting, because those topics are kind of done to death. I don't have anything new to say about those. I was raised Catholic, so I'm kind of just like, oh, the Mormon doesn't like the Catholics, big deal. And imprinting's gross, and we all know it's gross, so I don't need to talk about it much. So let's get into it. Number 1. I was expecting more romance out of this series. Only Twilight and Life and Death, because it is just Twilight again, feel romantic to me. Obviously, New Moon isn't really about the romance. It's about the loss and finding friendship and depression. But Eclipse and Breaking Dawn don't really feel romantic to me. I think the Bella-Edward relationship kind of runs out of places to go a little bit. And also, the more I think about it, the less I really like Edward as, like, the less I, as the reader, like Edward. I still think he's an interesting character and I like the book, but I'm not crazy about him. I'll get way more into that. The Bree Tanner novella is not supposed to be romantic. Midnight Sun is romantic a little bit, and then it just falls off a cliff. I'll get to it. But yeah, Eclipse and Breaking Dawn also I didn't get that romance love feeling, except for maybe a little bit at the end of Breaking Dawn. And I had a preconception of these books before I read them, especially hearing so much about Twilight. And I knew everything about Twilight before seeing the movies of the books, just because I've existed on the internet since they came out and it was just everywhere. So maybe that was something that I just went in with an expectation and it didn't meet it. But I kind of wish there was more romance in the later books, but I still really enjoyed them. So it doesn't, I don't know if that really matters. Number 2. So in the books, the Cullen family is more family than Coven because they don't drink human blood and therefore have more empathy and can develop more like a deeper relationship with each other. And that's interesting, but I compared a lot to Dracula, which is probably one of my favorite books of all time, just because it is a vampire story, but also the characters in Dracula are love each other. Like the tenderness and just earnest feeling they have for each other and their willingness to do anything for each other, you feel that tenderness is the word I want to use the most, because that's how it feels. It's so lovey. They're facing this incredible monster and they'll still, hunker down and do it for each other because they love each other. And they're not all in love with each other, obviously. So it's just comparing that to Twilight, I feel only Edward, Alice, and Carlisle seem to really actually like each other. I know that Rosalie and Edward have this begrudging sort of they're siblings who fight, but they'll still do anything for each other. And obviously they all do stuff for each other and they all protect Bella and stuff and they all love her and want to save her. But you don't get that connection between the characters. And I think that is sort of a disconnect I had while reading, because they have this reputation in the vampire community of being different and special. But I don't see that in the books. And I think that's a lost opportunity. I only read the Twilight series and Dracula and I Am Legend. Those are all the vampire books that I've read. So that's kind of the only context I have for a vampire book. I know that a vampire book isn't a genre. I was going to compare them to each other whether I wanted to or not. And I kind of had that thought after reading the series and thinking about Dracula again. Number 3. I care less and less as the story goes on that these are vampires and these are shape-shifting wolves. It does seem like one of those things where the more you know about it, the less interesting it is. Now, after reading the illustrated guide, I want to read more about the Children of the Moon, the true werewolves. And I know that we'll never really get anything like that, but it's very, wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle. It feels like there should be more there and there just isn't. And I think a lot of that is just maybe over-explaining, or maybe it's just not what Stephanie and I wanted to focus on, and that's totally fine. This doesn't, I know we have a lore book, but this doesn't really seem like a lore book series. Not to compare it, but this isn't a Song of Ice and Fire where you can have a world book and a history book. There isn't, an unexplained magic here. People know basically what's going on, especially at the end when you learn that, there are other immortal children, not immortal children. There are other human vampire hybrids, and so nothing in the universe is really unexplained. And so I feel like as a reader, you kind of miss something with that too. I wish there was more unexplained stuff. And that's why, again, I like the idea of the Children of the Moon and the werewolves, because we know nothing about them. Number 4. So according to this, the Twilight Saga, the Twilight Saga, the official illustrated guide, terrible title. So according to this, I have two main problems with the transformation aspect of a vampire. One of them is more personal and one of them just feels yucky. First, when you become a vampire and change from human to vampire, the venom burns off your tattoos if you have any, and they're gone, and you lose all blemishes and freckles and moles. And as someone with tattoos, freckles, and moles, that feels what is that supposed to mean? Vampires are these vampires are kind of discussed as this higher, better being. And so to have something like that be oh, you're better now because you don't have tattoos. I don't want to get into the Mormonism of Stephanie Meyer, but it feels like a Mormon take. And I just wasn't a fan. But that's not the real bad thing. The real bad thing is also if you have dark skin as a human, when you become a vampire, you have light olive toned skin. When you're white, obviously you just get whiter, but if you're black, you just lose your blackness. I know it's something they didn't do in the movies, thank God, but it just feels weird once again that this higher, better form of life also becomes whiter. That's just feels gross. And there's a few things in the story like this, and I don't know if that's trying to be more true to vampire lore or if there's something deeper, much worse going on, but either way, it feels gross, and I hate it. Number 5. Something I will say New Moon, both the book and the movie, does really well is kind of visualizing or telling how a depression haze can kind of feel. Bella in the book, you just as you're reading the book, it's just the depression. Edward leaves Bella, and you just get page November, page December, page January, page February. And that is so good. That is such a fun way to use that medium. I listened to it on audiobook, so it just said November, December with a few seconds in between like I just did. And that's not as strong, but that's my fault. And that is my fault because I'm more an audiobook person. That's the only Twilight book I have a physical copy of. But it's still really good. And the New Moon movie does a great movie version of that with Bella in the chair with that iconic shot of the seasons changing. I really like that they got that they got that part of the story across in such perfect ways for each medium. And I just wanted to say I really liked it. Number 6. I really enjoyed the short second life of Bree Tanner, and I think Stephenie Meyer should write more novella stories about Twilight, because I know that she wants to write a romance story and is going to keep doing that, and it's probably not what she wants to do, but the short second life of Bree Tanner has this nice little tragedy. I liked, it's nice reading a short contained story like that in the bigger world. And I don't think it needs to connect to the main Twilight story. Specifically, I think Arlo and Marcus and his betrayal and the forming of the Volturi would be just amazing for a little novella like this. And there are tons of stories in the Illustrated Guide that I think also would really work as novellas. You have this great outline you've made for yourself. You should go in and do it. I don't really see that happening from what I've seen. If she is making another book, it's going to be about Renesmee and Jacob, and I'll read it, but I won't like it. I'm not getting into the imprinting thing, but that's not what I would like to see out of this series. That's just not really what I want to see out of the series if it continued. Number 7, I have yo-yoed so much about my feelings on Jacob as a character. I really like him in New Moon. I think he does the best friend that's in love with you thing well. I think he's likable, even if he is in opposition to Edward. And all in all, I think New Moon is pretty strong because of that. But in Eclipse, I hate him. I feel like he's gross, toxic, manipulative. I can't root for him. I know that the fantasy is that these two men are in love with me and they're my best friends, even though as a reader, that fantasy feels like it's for the reader, because obviously Bella never really considers Jacob. She has this dream of having a kid, and that's basically it. But she never seriously considers Jacob as a love interest, and I can't stand Jacob in Eclipse. He is awful. I hate him. I can't root for him. It's just gross, and everything he does is gross, and I hate it. And so when I get to Breaking Dawn, I see that there's these 3 sections, there's these chapters that are from Jacob's perspective, and I'm dreading them. And I get to them and they're fun. They break up the book. I think that Breaking Dawn can kind of feel a little sparse, and without those Jacob chapters, I feel like it would be I don't think it would even feel like a full story, because so much of it is just Bella gets pregnant, and then from Bella's perspective, we have to make a bunch of friends. That's the 2 things that happen in that book, that basically if you don't have Jacob's perspective in the middle. And so I liked Jacob again there. But when I think about the character of Jacob as a whole, I can't get over just how gross he made me feel in Eclipse. So it's just, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. I could never be Team Jacob. Edward's fine, I guess. I can think of someone better for Bella, but I won't get into that today. This is going to be a long one. Number 8. So I read the main series with Bree Tanner in between Eclipse and Breaking Dawn. Then I read Midnight Sun and Life and Death back to back. And I liked the first third-ish of Midnight Sun, and then it was a slog. I gave it a 3 stars at the time on Goodreads, and the more I think about it, the more it's a 2. I don't know why Midnight Sun is the longest book in the series. It makes everything I don't like about Edward in the main series is 10 times worse in Midnight Sun. He can be toxic, smart. I get this big vibe that the entire time I'm rambling, he constantly to me feels like I know better than you. I'm more in love with you than you are with me. I'm doing what's best for you, and you should just listen to me and all this stuff. And it's so annoying having this male character telling this female character how to feel, and it makes it hard to root for him. And all of that is amplified so much in Midnight Sun that I really kind of struggled with finishing it. But then I immediately, because I was still in a Twilight mood, even if I didn't enjoy that book as much, I immediately read Life and Death, which I thought was amazing, mostly because it's Twilight again. And I think as just a contained story, Twilight is the best book. And Life and Death is just Twilight again, but with the gender swapped. So I had a lot of fun reading Life and Death. And now Life and Death is the book I revisit the most, mostly because Edith, the female Edward, the FemEd, the federal agent, mostly because Edith, I don't have this baggage with her about how, like, everything that's, like, toxic and annoying and I know better than you from Edward feels so different coming from Edith. And part of this is probably my own bias in that it's a woman and I'd much rather listen to a woman. I'd much rather listen to a woman than a man. But also, I have 5 books of Edward being kind of shitty. And I don't have that with Edith. Edith feels different enough that I don't just picture Edward being annoying in my head. I'm picturing this new Edith character who has some of the same faults that I care about less because of my own bias, essentially. And also, when I picture Edward in my head, I'm picturing Robert Pattinson in the first movie, who I don't think is hot. If I'm picturing Edith, I can picture, my imagination fills in the blank, so I don't have, like, the negative feeling. And of course, this is just my own bias, but still, like, it's just easier for me to enjoy Life and Death. That being said, I do have some problems with the gender swap. 2 things in particular, one less serious, one more serious, once again. First, why aren't Charlie and Renee, Bella/Beau's parents, gender swapped? Well, I don't know why we can't have a free spirit, fun-loving dad who's in love with a baseball player or a softball player if you have to make it super heterosexual, and living in Arizona, and a fishing, never left my hometown cop mom. Especially because it would be nice to see the dynamic of a mother and son in that situation, like some sort of estrangement, and not just a son and a father, because I feel like it's a missed opportunity to do more different. I know how close Life and Death is supposed to be to Twilight, but I still wish it could happen. I wish we could have had the mom that doesn't know how to talk to her son. Like, I think that'd be nice. I think that works in the story, and I don't see why they weren't gender swapped. The more serious thing is Stephenie Meyer having specifically Rosalie and her backstory, and Bella in Port Angeles are either victims of or almost victims of an SA, but Beau almost gets murdered in Port Angeles, and Royal, the male Rosalie, is beat up and left for dead instead. I don't know why only Stephenie Meyer's female characters are victims of SA and not her male characters. And I don't think there should be more SA in these books. If anything, there should be less in the original. It just feels weird that you can have female characters experience this, but you have to change it for a male character. I think if you're gonna have that kind of assault in your story, you have to have a really good reason, and it's tricky. And in general, it's probably better to leave that kind of stuff out. I don't really have a solution on what would feel better in Life and Death. I'm not rooting for these characters to experience something like that in Life and Death. I just have this weird disconnect, and I don't really have a solution for it, but I did have to bring it up. And to continue with Life and Death, I think I almost prefer Life and Death's ending. The audiobook narrator does an amazing job. I'll put his name on the screen. He did such a good job, and I also think that the chapter after Beau turns into a vampire, spoiler, is the strongest thing that I've read from Stephenie Meyer, which is only this series. The tragedy and pain, and you really feel the experience of becoming a vampire more in Life and Death than you do in Breaking Dawn, and just Edith's guilt and helplessness. It's all so good. I like that it's a self-contained story. It's really nice and wrapped up. But my favorite thing in the whole series is in Life and Death, when Boy Alice tells Edith that the 2 options are Beau becomes a vampire or you kill him trying to save him. You have to pick one. And Edith says, let him pick. We didn't have a choice. He can have a choice. And Beau says, just you. I want to stay with you. And this cute little tragic moment. And then the first thing in the next chapter is, I ended up changing my mind. And because how awful it is to experience turning into a vampire. And it's kind of a gut punch. And Boy Alice tells Edith, he made his choice. That's the real choice. We're going through with this. You're not killing him at this point. And just how sad the car ride from Arizona back to Forks is. It's the best thing Stephenie Meyer's written, I think, and I love it. I do have another little problem with it, though, and I know this is not intentional. Stephenie Meyer wanted to make Life and Death a complete story, so it has an ending, and the ending is Beau becoming a vampire. But I do find it interesting that Edward was strong enough to save Bella. The man was strong enough to save the woman, but Edith wasn't strong enough to save Beau. And it wouldn't really matter if there wasn't a bunch of other little stuff like that kind of bothers me in Twilight. And on that same note, Bella chooses to become a vampire without being in distress, really. She's choosing it for love, obviously, but she also doesn't want to get old. She thinks about it for a long time. The Cullen family give their points of view, and if they think they should or they shouldn't, and she has a lot of time to kind of deliberate about that choice. Beau is choosing because he wants to stay with Edith because he's in love, and it's very short notice. And so when Bella transforms, she can handle being a newborn. She can be around humans and not immediately attack them. She's not feral and constantly thirsty. But so is Beau, and in the main series it's kind of explained, well, she chose it, so she was ready for it, so she can handle it. But Beau definitely wasn't ready for it, and he can handle it just as well. One of the last things that happens in Life and Death is that, girl Billy Black and Beau talk, and that's the last scene in the book. He has a hard time with it, obviously, but he can handle it. And so maybe it's just because Bella/Beau really love people, but it's kind of like you establish this and then it's different, it's not a big deal. Now this kind of goes back to my little graphic back here, but every vampire in the Twilight series is compet. Or does vampirism enforce compet stereotypes? Or what I'm saying is every vampire is straight, which I find unrealistic, I guess is what I want to say. You're telling me the thousands and thousands of vampires, that's not too many, because you think about the newborn wars and stuff like that in the South. There have been so many vampires, and there's a lot of vampires with whole bios in this, and not a single one is gay. And that seems to just be because of Stephenie Meyer and everything. I think that Bella and Alice would make a great couple. Just my thoughts. It's just one of those little things that, I know why it is the way it is. It just still bothers me. And on that note, in an interview, I think Kristen Stewart talked about how if she was going to do a remake of Twilight, it would be a gay story because you've got themes of forbidden love and change and ostracization from society. And I really agree with that. I think you could, there's a couple of ways you could do it. If you want to just focus on the forbidden love sort of thing, that's very simple. I also think you could have an I saw the vampire sparkle moment. I think vampirism could work really well as a trans allegory. You have things like you're choosing to change your body. It's painful. Ostracization from society. But being removed from normal society, stuff like that, I think you would make that allegory really strong. But you don't want to pull a J.K. Rowling, one, ever, but two, how she has, how werewolves in Harry Potter are apparently a metaphor for AIDS, but one of the two vampire characters attacks and infects children. That's huge yikes. And you wouldn't want to be vampires are monsters and vampires are trans people because trans people are monsters. We don't need any more of that going on. So I think you could do something really interesting with it, but you also have to be aware of stuff like that. And obviously this is theoretical, but I did want to talk about it. Number 11. How I read Edward's sort of toxicity is kind of because he is this person who's been 17 for a very long time, and he can kind of get immediate feedback on how people feel about him and just feel about anything because he can read their mind and hear their thoughts. So when he's not really taking Bella at her word because he can't get that immediate feedback that she's telling the truth, that she loves him as much as him and all this stuff, you can kind of understand it. But when you're reading it, I don't care. He's kind of just too much too often. And I like the payoff at the very end where Bella removes her shield and she can read his mind, and he's very happy because he can finally feel her thoughts, and he kind of gets that validation. I like that moment, but it doesn't really justify Edward's insecurity and knowing betterness all the freaking time in this book. And also I just want to point out that Edith and Beau don't ever figure out that he has a shield, at least in the story, because the story ends so soon. And I still don't feel that toxicity and stuff. So yeah, Edith and Beau forever, please. I'm team Edith and Beau. Now, I know most of the things I've talked about have been my problems with Twilight, but that's kind of just because, but I'm kind of just in a position where it's something I really liked. So I want to pick it apart and look at all the insides, you know? I wouldn't have put this much thought into something I didn't think was good. The more interesting things I have to say are the negatives. But I really liked these books. I really enjoyed the movies. I really enjoyed the memes. The memes are one of the best parts, honestly. So much of my preconceived notions about Twilight were nonsense. Growing up and just seeing sparkly vampires, like there's nothing wrong with doing something different. But I really like these books. I really like the movies. I think Life and Death is the best one. I'll say it. And yeah, I just wanted to get all these thoughts out there. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.